I wonder whether or not they've actually misclicked the flop, and if they did intentionally do this, they need to stop playing poker. Yo guys, what's up? Ben Ababi here, and welcome back to another episode. So I am feeling and probably looking a little bit tired this week, and that is because it has been a very, very busy past 5 or 6 days. On the weekend, we had our second leg of our kind of wedding celebration, and we have done a leg in Brisbane, but this leg was in London. So we had organised an event with friends and family. Needless to say, volume has been low and I am pretty exhausted, but I definitely wanted to get a video out this week for you guys. But let's take a look at the graph and the hands that I did play in the last 5 days first. As you can see, we have continued that upward trajectory of winnings, and we did book about 7 or 8k in green line, and we ran about 4k above EV, which feels very, very nice, I won't lie. And then also made about 10 binds and ran about 4 or 5 binds above EV. Overall, very, very small sample, but it is really nice on those really low volume weeks where you've got loads of other stuff on your mind, just to have a bit of a plain sailing week. So there is going to be no faffing around this week, and we're going to jump straight on into the hands. So in hand one, I would like to hear people's thoughts because we face a cold 5-bet all in, a very, very rare situation, and we have got kings. What do we want to do? Second, we have a very, very curious hand versus a recreational where they make what can only be described as one of the most questionable floats I've ever seen in my life. We're going to mix up today with a bomb pot on ACR versus a very aggressive reg. And lastly, we make a bluff versus an old school reg, and hopefully it doesn't go pear-shaped like many of the other bluffs have done in past episodes. So first up, we have got pocket kings in the cutoff, and we make a very standard open. We get 3-bet on the button versus a reg. Now there's no notes on this reg, no reads. This reg is just a reg, and I've got them reg tagged. I haven't played with them much, so I can't really tell you anything more than that. Now, we get cold 4-bet by the small blind, and that was the real timing, about 4 or 5 seconds. Now this reg is from the previous episode where I had ace-8 of clubs, and I triple off versus their big blind 3-bet and my button call on 9, 7, 5, 3 with a flush draw, and then 9 river, and I have ace-8 of clubs. They snap call with second pair, which by no means I'm saying is a bad call, but their timing was very, very quick, and they basically do not really like to fold hands. I've since upgraded this player from a recreational on probation to a reg that's not fully a reg. I think that's probably the best way to say it. They may well get upgraded to reg tag at some point, but for whatever reason, or for a number of reasons, and for a number of hands that I have on them, and for notes I have on them, etc., they can't really be put to the reg tag just yet. We then get, in this timing, which is about 5 or 6 seconds, a shove from the big blind. Now, in the past maybe 4 or 5 episodes, there has been, in my opinion, quite a lot of results-oriented thinking. And I wonder whether or not, well, I don't wonder, I kind of feel that the reason for that is because people get to see my opponent's cards, and then obviously it's very easy to know the result and then project into the hand what their perspective is without kind of maybe looking at this a little bit more objectively rather than subjectively, or should I say results-oriented thinking. So in this situation now, I am going to not show you the result, and I'm going to share in the comments what I did. So obviously I have maybe called it off, or I have maybe folded, and I would just really like to hear people tell me in the comments what they want to do in this situation, and maybe after like a day or so when people have kind of shared their thoughts, I will let you know what happened in this hand. Next up, we have ace-king of spades in the big blind, and we get an open from a very good reg who is under the gun. We then get 3-bet by that dark green tag that I mentioned before, which is recreational on probation, and I make it $200. Just want to kind of reiterate that this is obviously the tightest situation on the table, under the gun, MP, and then big blind. We flop a very pleasing top pair on king, queen, 5. Now I think that the bet sizing here can be pretty much whatever you want to do because you're playing a recreational. I think if this was like button, small blind, big blind, I would almost always go small. The reason for that is I think the small blind as a recreational, it's more intuitive for them to 3-bet out the small blind with like marginal holdings than it is to 3-bet versus under the gun. So with that in mind, I just want to use a bigger sizing on this texture because I think that their range is just generally going to be stronger. And on a wet board like this, I just want to rush in money. You might argue that by betting small, I then make them call hands like jacks and tens, but I don't think I'm stacking those combos anyway, and I'd much rather kind of like get max versus like ace queen or a flush draw or like jack 10 or something like that. So with all that considered, I decide to go half pot. We get absolutely snap called on the flop, and we see a 6 clubs bring a second flush draw. I think the only option here is to shove. It's about kind of 0.7, 0.6 SPR. I think this is just very, very, very clear shove, and I'm sure everyone watching this would agree with that. I just want to note also, they did snap call the flop, and I want to talk about that a little bit in a minute. I didn't actually realize that in game, but anyway, they do call the turn, and let's just say I was pretty shocked when I saw this combo that has called the flop. I decided I'm not going to run it twice. I think it's quite important to run it once versus recreationals in these kind of situations if they're willing to stack off hands like this and not give other regs an opportunity to stack them. But I just quickly want to go back to something that I hadn't realized in game. I wonder whether or not they've actually misclicked the flop, because this seems pretty out there, right? This seems like maybe not a thing even from recreationals. I have seen this kind of thing happen a lot of times in my career, don't get me wrong. But now that I look at this and they have absolutely snap called, and I don't really remember any other hand, they probably left after this hand, I do wonder whether or not this was a misclick. Anyway, you let me know in the comments. But either way, it has gone very, very well for us. And if they did intentionally do this, they need to stop playing poker. Next up, we have ace king again, and we are on the button this time, and we get an open from a reg from under the gun. Now, this is the same old school reg that I mentioned a few videos ago, where I bluffed 6-5 suited in a spot where I basically butchered the whole hand, and they made an extremely sick hero call with queens. I'm not gonna lie, my reads on this player have changed quite a lot since this hand, and let's just say that they are in the mix. Make of that what you will. So we 3-bet the button with ace king offsuit, and we get cold called in the big blind by a pretty big recreational. Again, recreational on probation, no severely good reads. We see a pretty nice 9-5-3 with 2 diamonds. We obviously do have the ace of diamonds in our hand, and we should have a monumental range advantage here as well. I decided I'm going to bet my hand always with the ace of diamonds because it's a great blocker to hold. We get good bluffing opportunities on later streets, we've got overs, and just good things can happen. That's not to say you can't check back, but I prefer betting. We see a queen of spades, which is definitely going to hit us the most. We're going to be c-betting hands like king queen with a diamond, for example, or ace queen, and naturally we're going to have our over pairs as well, and also like combos like jack 10, for example. So I decide to bet my hand always on the turn, and this time I go for half pot. We get a very quick call again, and we see a 5 of diamonds completing the flush on the river. Now, I'm trying to think what the bottom of my value range here is going to be. So, as I kind of alluded to before, my reads on this player have kind of changed. They are a lot stickier and a lot wider than I thought that they would be, and perhaps you may argue that maybe they should be. So I think that they are going to arrive with a number of combos that maybe shouldn't be arriving. A hand like pocket sixes or ace 9 or something like that. Just hands that probably just should never have called the turn, should maybe have folded pre-flop, etc. So I think versus a lot of players, my value range here is going to be a bit narrower, but versus this exact player, my value range is going to be, let's just say, 1 pair plus. So I'm obviously going to have an abundance of value, and therefore I need some bluffs in that range as well. And this combo obviously blocks a decent amount of flushes. It seems like a pretty good shoving combo to me. You may say that we'd rather use a combo like ace jack offsuit, but I'm going to be cold calling that hand a lot. I don't always 3-bet it pre-flop, so my arrival is quite narrow. So after a bit of tank, I do decide to shove the river pure. And honestly, I was pretty wary because I've seen this player get very, very sticky already, but I think we have a premium bluff. We get pretty quickly called by the old jack 8 of diamonds. So I think this goes to show kind of what I was saying before. And by the way, I had this read before this hand, but this really solidified that read. Under the gun open, defending the sandwich with jack 8 suited, choosing not to check shove the turn, which I guess is okay. All very speculative, and unfortunately this time we did lose the stack. So next up we are at WPN, and we are on a bomb pot table. So the RNG spins, and classic, we run bad in the 50-50, we get out of position, and the other reg gets the button. Now this reg is a notorious aggressive reg. Extremely difficult to play. and I know that they have loads of bluffs. We see 10-10-7 rainbow, and we obviously have the dream hand on this board. Now, because both players go to the flop with 100% range, we are always going to be extremely wide, and I really want to be checking some very good hands on this texture, particularly versus very aggressive opponents. This is one of those occasions where I decide to check, and we see a half pot bet from villain. Now, I am quite surprised to see half pot, not because I think it's a bad sizing, just because I think it's a bit more of an unconventional sizing. Perhaps heads up, because I haven't played heads up one pots. This is actually a very conventional sizing, and I'm just waffling. Someone can let me know about that, by the way. Either way, I believe that when we go to the flop with 100% range, I'm going to have to be continuing this flop extraordinarily wide. Not only that, but in position is going to get to bet very, very, very liberally because they are in position and they just are in a monumental advantageous spot. Because we go to the flop with 100% range, I am constantly going to have to be out of position. And the other thing is, for in position not just to turbo profit with entire range by betting here, we're going to be raising quite a lot. It's not too dissimilar to a single raise pot, big blind versus button, where you end up check raising quite mergy on these pair boards. So what I'm saying is I'm going to be raising here with loads of underpairs, a load of 7x, and a load of gut shots and open-enders. Because I'm going to be raising quite mergy, I don't want to be raising too big, and on this occasion I do decide to raise about 50% pot, which is roughly 3x. As you can see, they didn't even think about it and they called. This is what this player is very well known for. They basically just somehow can play incredibly well by snap making every single decision. I'm jealous. I wish I was able to do that, but I'm not. So what I'm saying is I can't really read too much into the snap call. You may just say it's weak, but it definitely can be strong. We see a two of spades, which is just improving our hand further. I think that in theory, and again, we can't really know what the theory of the bomb pot is here. Well, I can't. There will be a mixed sizing scheme here. I just want to build my betting structure around my 7x and my underpairs because I will have raised very, very mergy on the flop. With that in mind, I decide to use a single sizing, and that is a block sizing. The other thing to mention is that exploitatively, I think going small is very, very, very good against a very aggressive player, particularly in an extremely wide range spot where in position knows that I am going to be forced into continuing in a variety of ways, including raises, and therefore arriving quite merged on the turn. If I go big here, I just allow a very aggressive player to defend less and just make more natural folds. When I go small, they're kind of forced more into the weeds, as am I, and I think I'd prefer to be there than just make their life really easy. So we go 1/3 pot, and again, we get basically snap called by villain. Now we see a very interesting 6 of spades on the river, completing the flush, giving us a flush, obviously, and also we do block trips as well. Now, what are we going to do with our sizing scheme? I think now we can probably take just like a theoretical approach. Assuming we played one sizing on the turn and not split, we probably now just want to have two sizes. The small size is going to be for like 7x, and maybe even like a kind of a boat, like a 10-7 or something like that, although that might check. And then we're going to have a very big sizing for all in with maybe flushes and some other low boats like pocket 2s or pocket 6s or something like that that unblocks the calls. So now we have the theory baseline. Let's think about this exploitatively. What is an aggressive player going to do versus check raise small, block, and then shove versus check raise small, block, and then block? I very strongly feel that they are going to attack the small sizing very, very often. Again, this is kind of very much coupled with the fact that our hand actually makes quite an intuitive block because we just block the calls so heavily. So I decide to go ahead and bet the sizing that I would with a 7, which is 10% pot. And we get absolutely snap shoved on the river by ace-9 offsuit. And let's just say I feel very, very happy that the plan has very much come together on this one. Let me know what you think about that hand as well. So that's going to do it for today's episode. I know it's a bit of a shorter one and maybe the hands were a little bit sporadic, but I didn't play that much volume. But hopefully next week we'll have a load more hands for you guys. But until next time, take care and I will see you at the tables.